The cold metal of the auction platform burned against my bare feet, but I refused to show any pain. Chains dug into my wrists, and a shock collar pressed against my throat, ready to drop me if I so much as twitched wrong. Around me, hundreds of alien buyers stared up from the crowd, their strange eyes gleaming with hunger, curiosity, and greed. I stood there, the only human in a market that spanned half a galaxy, and I waited. My name is Ethan Carter, and 3 months ago I was a signals officer aboard the deep space vessel Horizon's Edge. We had been charting unmapped regions near the edge of explored space when the raiders hit us. They came from nowhere, punched through our shields before we could even send a distress call, and boarded us within minutes. I was the only survivor they took alive. The rest of my crew did not make it through that night. The auctioneer was a tall creature with skin the color of wet bark. He waved his 4 arms dramatically as he spoke to the crowd in the common tongue of the stars. He called me an exotic specimen, a rare find, a creature from a world nobody had heard of, strong enough to last 3 months in the slaver pits without breaking. I kept my face blank. I had learned quickly that showing emotion only made things worse. The raiders had tried to break me in every way they knew how. They had failed, but not because I was brave. They had failed because I had one single thought burning inside me, hotter than any anger. I was going to survive. I was going to get home. And whoever stood between me and that goal would learn what a determined human could do. The bidding started low. A merchant with tentacles for hands offered a small sum, hoping to buy me as a curiosity for his collection. Another buyer, a heavy creature in golden armor, raised the price, clearly thinking I might serve as a pit fighter. The numbers climbed higher. I listened without reacting, though my heart pounded against my ribs. Each bid was another moment further from home. Then the crowd went silent. A new figure had entered the auction hall. She walked through the parting crowd like she owned every stone beneath her feet, and in truth, she probably did. Her skin was the color of moonlight, smooth and flawless. Her hair fell in silver waves down her back, and her eyes were the deep blue of the ocean at night. She wore robes of white and dark purple, trimmed with gold thread so fine it seemed to glow. Behind her walked 6 guards in polished silver armor, each one tall enough to make the auctioneer look small. She was a princess. That much was clear from the way every creature in the hall bowed or lowered their eyes. Later, I would learn her name was Princess Lyra Vainal, second heir to the silver throne of the Elthari Empire, one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy. Her people ruled thousands of worlds. They saw themselves as the finest minds and bodies the stars had ever produced, and she was their brightest star. She climbed the steps of the auction platform with a grace that did not match her age. I later learned she was only 19 cycles old by her people's counting, but she had been born into a court where daggers hid in every smile, and she had survived long enough to become something rare. She had become dangerous. Her blue eyes swept across me. She did not flinch at the marks on my arms from the shock collars. She did not flinch at the dirt caked into my skin or the scars from 3 months of poor treatment. She did not even flinch when our eyes met, and I let her see every bit of the cold fury I had been saving for the first person who treated me like property. Most buyers looked away from that stare. She did not. Instead, the corner of her mouth lifted in the smallest smile. She turned to the auctioneer and spoke a single number. The amount was high enough to buy a small moon. The entire room gasped. A noble behind her tried to bid higher, but one glance from her guards silenced him immediately. The auctioneer slammed his gavel down. Sold. Her guards unlocked my chains from the platform and led me down the steps. The princess walked ahead, never looking back, clearly trusting that I would follow. As we passed through the gawking crowd, she slowed just enough for me to catch up beside her. She spoke in a voice soft enough that only I could hear. Try not to die, little stranger. I have use for you. I should have been afraid. I should have kept my mouth shut. 3 months of captivity had taught me that speaking out of turn brought pain. But something about her tone, so calm and certain, reminded me of every officer I had ever served under who thought they understood the enemy in front of them. I smiled, a small quiet smile. As you say, Your Highness. She glanced sideways at me, and for just a moment her step slowed. She had not expected me to answer in her own language. She had not expected me to speak at all. I saw the spark of curiosity flash in her eyes before she masked it again. Outside the auction hall, a floating carriage waited for us. It hovered a hand's width above the marble road, carved from polished stone and lined with soft cushions. The princess stepped inside first, and her guards gestured for me to follow. I climbed in carefully, my wrists still chained, and sat across from her. As the carriage rose into the air and began to move through the shining spires of the capital city, she studied me openly. I studied her back. Neither of us spoke for a long time. Finally, she broke the silence. "You are not what the catalog claimed." "What did the catalog claim?" I asked. "A simple beast from a world too small to matter, a curiosity, entertainment for a noble's garden." She tilted her head. "But you hold my gaze, you speak the high tongue, and the slavers kept you alive for 3 months when they should have broken you in 3 days. What are you really?" I leaned back against the cushioned seat. My chains clinked softly. I thought about the question for a long moment before answering. "I am just a man," I said quietly, "from a small world, a world your people have never heard of." She studied me with those ocean eyes. I could see the calculation behind them. She did not believe me, but she did not press the question either. Instead, she smiled that small, dangerous smile again. "We shall see," she said. "We shall see." The carriage climbed higher, and through the crystal windows I could see the capital city of the Elthari Empire spreading out below us like a jeweled quilt. Towers of silver and white glass reached toward a pale violet sky. Flying ships moved between them in orderly lines. In the distance, I could see the imperial palace itself, a vast structure that looked more like a mountain carved into art than a building. This was the heart of an empire that spanned more worlds than I could count, and I was being taken into its deepest chambers, wearing chains, owned by a princess who collected dangerous things for her own amusement. She did not know what I was. She did not know where I came from. She did not know that somewhere, far across the stars, my people had already noticed that one of their sons had gone missing. She did not know that the galaxy's newest species had one simple rule, written into the heart of every fleet captain and every diplomat and every soldier who ever wore the uniform of Earth. We never leave our own behind, not ever, no matter how far we have to travel, no matter who stands in the way. As the carriage carried us toward the palace that would become my prison, I closed my eyes and let myself remember the faces of my crew. 12 good men and women, friends, family, people who had trusted me to come home with them. I was not going home yet, but I was going to survive. I was going to wait. I was going to watch this princess and her court of silver knives, and I was going to learn every one of their secrets. And when my people came for me, as I knew they would, this princess who did not flinch would learn what it meant to underestimate a human. She would learn what my kind was capable of. But for now, I kept my head down. I kept my voice soft. I played the part of the quiet stranger she had bought for her amusement. The carriage descended toward the palace gates, and my new life as a prisoner in a golden cage began. The palace of the silver throne was more dangerous than the slave pits had ever been. In the pits, the danger was obvious. Here, it hid behind painted smiles and soft words. Princess Lyra placed me in her personal wing, not in the lower quarters where servants usually slept. This alone caused whispers to spread through the court within hours. A foreign creature, chained and bought at market, sleeping 3 doors down from the second heir to the throne. The older nobles muttered that she had finally lost her sense. The younger ones laughed and took bets on how long I would last before I was found in a garden pond. I slept with one eye open for the first week, then I stopped sleeping much at all. My duties, such as they were, involved standing behind the princess at meals, at public events, and in council meetings. I carried her ceremonial cup. I held her cloak when she removed it. I tasted her food before she ate it, because her older sister, Crown Princess Valeth, had already tried to poison her twice this year alone. The Elthari court was a den of serpents dressed in fine clothing. Every conversation carried three meanings. Every compliment hid a blade. Servants spied on nobles. Nobles spied on each other. Even the walls had ears, because the palace was so old that entire networks of hidden passages ran through its bones, carrying whispers from one wing to another. And through all of it, Princess Lyra moved with the easy grace of someone who had never known a single safe moment in her life. She tested me constantly. On the third day, she left a sharp letter opener on the table beside me and walked out of the room. She wanted to see if I would pick it up. I did not. On the fifth day, she spoke openly about her father's failing health in my presence, words that could have been called treason. She wanted to see if I would run to report her. I did not. On the seventh day, she made me fight one of her guards. His name was Caldros. He stood nearly 7 feet tall, with shoulders like stone walls, and he carried a training blade that was only slightly less deadly than a real one. I had no weapon. I was expected to lose quickly, and probably painfully, as a lesson about my place in this new world. I was still recovering from 3 months of poor food and worse treatment. My ribs showed through my skin. My hands shook slightly when I was tired. By every measure that mattered, this guard should have ended the fight in seconds. He did not. I had spent 6 years in the military forces of Earth. I had trained in every unarmed combat style my people had ever invented, plus a few we had borrowed from our own history and improved upon. The Elthari were stronger than humans. They were faster. Their bones were denser, and their reflexes were sharper. But they had one great weakness that they did not know about themselves. They had never fought a human before. They did not understand how stubborn we could be. They did not understand that when a human's arm is hurt, we keep fighting with the other one. They did not understand that our species had once chased down prey animals by simply refusing to stop, running them into the ground over hours of relentless pursuit. Endurance was written into every bone and muscle I had. Pain tolerance was something we practiced for fun. Caldros swung his training blade in a wide arc aimed at my head. I ducked and let the blade pass over me. He followed with a kick that would have broken a normal ribcage. I took most of the force on my forearm, felt something crack inside me, and kept moving anyway. The fight should have ended there. It did not. I moved inside his reach, where his long blade became useless. I used my elbows, my knees, every short-range tool my trainers had drilled into me. I took hits that should have dropped me. I gave hits back that should not have hurt him, but each one landed in a joint or a nerve cluster that his armor did not fully protect. 3 minutes later, Caldros was on his knees, his blade lying in the dirt, his breath coming in ragged gasps. I stood above him, bleeding from my nose, one arm hanging at an awkward angle and still refusing to fall. The training yard had gone silent. 20 guards stood watching, their faces showing something between confusion and shock. An alien primate, half-starved and unarmed, had just defeated one of the princess's best warriors. Princess Lyra watched from a balcony above. When I looked up, I saw something new in her expression. Not amusement, not curiosity. Something closer to the look a scholar gets when an experiment produces a result they did not predict. She had me brought to her private chambers that evening. The palace doctors had set my arm in a healing wrap that tingled with some kind of energy. My ribs were bound. My face was washed. I stood before her in clean clothes, which was itself a strange feeling after months in rags. She poured 2 glasses of pale blue wine and handed one to me. I stared at it. A princess of the Elthari Empire did not share wine with a slave. This was not how the rules of her world worked. "Drink," she said. "You have earned a conversation." I drank. The wine was sweet and sharp at the same time, with a warmth that spread through my chest. She sat across from me, her silver hair loose around her shoulders for the first time since I had known her. She looked younger this way, and for a brief moment I remembered that she was only 19 cycles old. A child, by the standards of some cultures, though she had the weight of an empire on her young shoulders. Tell me what you are, she said. The Imperial databases have no record of your species. The raiders claim they found you in uncharted space near the edge of mapped territory, but you fight like no creature I have ever seen. You speak our language. You endure injuries that should kill you. So I ask you again, and I ask you plainly. What are you, Ethan Carter? I met her ocean blue eyes. I thought about lying. I thought about telling her the truth. In the end, I gave her something in between. I am from a small world, I said. My people are young. We only reached the stars a short time ago. Your empire has probably never noticed us, but we have been fighting long before we ever learned to fly, and we are not as fragile as we look. She studied me for a long moment, then she smiled. A small world, she said softly, a young people, and yet you defeated Caldros, who has served my family for 10 cycles. You endured the pits when stronger species broke within days. There is something you are not telling me. Many things, Your Highness. Her smile grew wider. She found my honesty amusing, which I had expected. Among her people, open honesty was so rare that it might as well have been a weapon. Nobody ever said what they meant. I said exactly what I meant, and she could not decide whether I was being clever or simple. You interest me, Ethan Carter, she said. I have bought many strange things in my short life. A singing stone from the deep worlds, a flower that blooms only once every 1,000 years, a beast with 6 eyes that could see the future, though it only ever predicted its own death. But you are the first one I have not been able to catalog. I am sorry to be difficult, Your Highness. She laughed then, a real laugh, bright and surprised, as if she had forgotten she was allowed to make such a sound. I saw one of her hidden guards shift uncomfortably in the shadows of the room. A princess laughing at something a slave said was not how things were done. You are trouble, she said, shaking her head. I can see it in you, but I think you will be interesting trouble. Stay close to me, Ethan. Watch everything. Speak when I ask you to and stay silent when I do not. My sister means to end my life before the next season turns. If you help me survive long enough to take my rightful place on the throne, I will grant you your freedom. My word upon it. I considered her offer. Freedom was a word that had lost most of its meaning over the past 3 months. Freedom to what? I was 10,000 light years from home, in an empire that had never heard of Earth, sitting across from a princess who had bought me at market. Freedom in this place meant very little. But freedom was the first step toward getting home. I accept, Your Highness, I said. Good, she refilled my glass. Now drink with me, Ethan Carter of the small world, and tell me about the stars you came from. Tell me about your people and your home and the battles you have fought. Tell me something true if you can remember how. So I did. I told her carefully chosen truths, weaving around the things I did not want her to know. I told her about the color of Earth's sky and the taste of rain and the laughter of children on a summer afternoon. I told her about my family, long gone now, and about the crew I had lost when the raiders came. She listened to all of it. She did not speak. She did not interrupt. She simply listened, her blue eyes unblinking, as if she were memorizing every word. When I finished, the wine glasses were empty, and the first morning light was beginning to show through the crystal windows. She stood and walked to the window, her silver hair catching the pale light. You are a strange creature, Ethan Carter, she said softly, her back to me. I do not know what to make of you, but I find that I do not wish to lose you yet. Sleep now, tomorrow. We begin learning how to keep me alive. I stood, bowed, and left her chambers. As I walked back to my own small room, I passed by the shadowed forms of her hidden guards, who watched me with expressions I could not quite read. And far away, in a system nobody in this empire had ever heard of, the Earth Defense Fleet was quietly tracking the faint signal of a distress beacon that had been broadcasting for 3 months. They had found my trail, they were coming. But I did not know that yet, and neither did she. The assassination attempt came faster than any of us expected. It was during the Festival of Rising Moons, the most important celebration in the Elthari calendar. Every major noble house in the empire sent representatives. The grand hall of the imperial palace was filled with over 2,000 guests, all in their finest ceremonial robes, all standing in careful formation to pledge their loyalty to the emperor and his heirs. Princess Lyra stood on a raised stone dais beside her father, the emperor, and her older sister, Crown Princess Valeth. Her ceremonial robes were so heavy and elaborate that they restricted how quickly she could move. Her jeweled headdress made it hard to turn her head. Every part of the outfit that was meant to display her royal status also made her a better target. I stood 3 steps below the dais, in my usual position behind her. My eyes swept the crowd constantly, looking for patterns that did not belong. Months of training on the horizon's edge had taught me how to spot threats in moving crowds. Months in the slave pits had taught me how to spot killers specifically. I saw them 30 seconds before they moved. 3 figures, dressed as serving staff, carrying trays of crystal glasses. They moved through the crowd in a triangle pattern, the kind of formation that was meant to split a target's attention. The middle one carried his tray too carefully. The other 2 moved with the easy grace of trained fighters, pretending to be something they were not. I had studied the methods of the Korthani raiders during my time in the pits. They had taught me, without meaning to, exactly what a professional strike team looked like when they were about to move. And what I was seeing now was Korthani method, even though the assassins themselves were Ilthari. Someone had hired professionals, someone with power and gold, and the desire to see Princess Lyra dead before the night ended. I had no weapon. Slaves were not permitted to carry anything sharp at royal functions, but I had something else. I had 10 feet of space between me and the first assassin, and I had 3 seconds to close the distance before he reached the dais. I moved. The serving tray in my hands was heavy silver, polished to a mirror shine, worth more than some small houses. I did not care about its value. I swung it in a tight arc and brought the edge across the first assassin's throat with everything I had. He made a choked sound and collapsed, his own tray of crystal glasses shattering around him. The crowd began to scream. The other 2 assassins abandoned their trays and pulled curved knives from inside their serving robes. They moved toward the dais with professional speed, ignoring me completely because I was just a slave with a silver tray. That was their mistake. The second assassin tried to run past me. I dropped the tray and tackled him, using his own momentum to drive him into a nearby pillar. His head hit the stone with a heavy sound, and he went limp. I pulled his knife from his belt and turned just in time to see the third assassin leap onto the dais. Princess Lyra had turned to run, but her heavy robes tangled around her legs. Her guards were still drawing their weapons, caught by surprise by how quickly the attack had unfolded. The assassin was 3 steps from her, his knife raised, and nobody was close enough to stop him. Nobody except me. I threw the knife. I am not a trained knife thrower. I have never been good at it. In training, my scores were always average at best. But somehow, in that moment, the knife flew straight and true. It struck the assassin in the shoulder of his knife arm, not a killing blow, but enough to spin him sideways and make him drop his blade. He recovered in a heartbeat. He grabbed Princess Lyra with his good arm and pulled her against his chest, using her body as a shield. His other hand snatched up the fallen blade. He pressed it against her throat. The grand hall went silent. 200 guards had their weapons pointed at him. The emperor stood frozen, his face white with fear for his daughter. Crown Princess Valeth watched from her position at the edge of the dais, her expression carefully controlled, though I thought I saw something almost like disappointment in her eyes. The assassin was breathing hard. His voice, when he spoke, was steady despite the blood running down his arm. "Nobody moves," he said. "The princess comes with me. Anyone follows, she dies." Princess Lyra's eyes found mine across the space between us. She was afraid, truly afraid for perhaps the first time in her life. But she was also thinking. I could see her mind working behind those ocean blue eyes, calculating options, considering what she could do. I held her gaze. I made a small motion with my hand, down low where the assassin could not see it. A signal that would have meant nothing to her people, but which any human soldier would have recognized immediately. Drop. Her eyes widened slightly. She understood. She did not know why, but she understood that I was asking her to do something. I picked up a heavy ceremonial cup from a nearby table. The cup was solid gold, weighted with jewels, nearly as heavy as a hammer. I did not lift it to throw it. I just held it loosely at my side, looking defeated and unthreatening. I began to walk slowly toward the dais. The assassin watched me come with hard eyes. "Stop," he said. "Not one step closer, creature." "I am not attacking," I said, keeping my voice soft and hopeless. "I am just her property. My master bought me at great cost. If she dies tonight, I will be given to her sister, and her sister will have me sent back to the pits. Please, let me speak with her first. Let me say goodbye." The assassin hesitated. He had expected the guards to charge or negotiate or try something clever. A slave begging for a chance to say farewell to his mistress was not on his list of expected responses. His confusion cost him half a second. Half a second was all I needed. I was 3 steps from the dais. I flicked my eyes sideways just for a moment at a spot behind him. It was an old trick, older than spaceflight, older than gunpowder, probably older than written language. Make your enemy look behind him, and he forgets what is in front of him. His eyes moved, just for a heartbeat. Princess Lyra dropped. She went completely limp in his grip, suddenly becoming 100 pounds of dead weight. Her heavy ceremonial robes pulled her toward the floor. The assassin staggered forward, thrown off balance. I threw the gold cup. It struck him in the face with the full weight of all that heavy metal and precious stones. Something cracked. He fell backward, losing his grip on the princess entirely. She hit the stone floor of the dais and rolled away from him. I closed the last distance in 2 steps. The assassin was struggling to rise, his face a mask of pain. I did not give him the chance to recover. I used everything I had been taught about ending a fight quickly, and I did not slow down until he stopped moving. Then I was standing on the dais, breathing hard, bleeding from a cut I did not remember getting. Princess Lyra was on the floor, her silver hair spilling around her like liquid moonlight, her ocean eyes wide and staring up at me. The grand hall was silent. 2,000 nobles, 200 guards, an emperor, and a crowned princess, all of them watching me. I extended my hand to Princess Lyra. After a long moment she took it. I pulled her to her feet. Her hand was shaking. Mine was steady. "Are you hurt, Your Highness?" I asked. She shook her head slowly. She was looking at me as if she had never truly seen me before. Her lips parted. She started to speak, but no words came out. Before either of us could say anything else, a messenger burst into the grand hall. His clothes were dusty from hard riding. He was gasping for breath. He ran straight through the crowd, past the stunned nobles, and threw himself on one knee before the emperor. "Your Imperial Majesty," he gasped. "Forgive this intrusion. An unknown fleet has just emerged from jump space at the edge of our territory. 12 warships. Their design matches nothing in our records. They have not fired on any of our outposts. They are broadcasting a single message over and over in the common tongue of the stars." The emperor's face had gone very still. "What is the message?" The messenger swallowed hard. He looked once at me, then looked away quickly, as if afraid to meet my eyes. "The message says, 'Return our citizen, or we shall come and collect him ourselves. You have 6 hours to respond.'" The grand hall erupted into chaos. Nobles shouted questions. Guards raised their weapons to the ceiling in a show of readiness. The emperor began issuing orders to his generals. Crown Princess Valeth's face had gone pale, which was unusual for her. But Princess Lyra was not looking at any of that. She was looking only at me. And in her ocean blue eyes, for the first time since I had known her, I saw something new. Fear not of me, not yet fear of what I meant. Her hand, still in mine, squeezed tightly. Her voice was very small. "Ethan," she whispered, "what have you not told me?" I looked down at her, this young princess who had bought me at a slave auction 3 months ago, who had tested me, who had begun to trust me, who I had just saved. And I felt a strange mix of emotions I could not easily name. "I think, Your Highness," I said quietly, "that it is time we had a long conversation, privately, soon." She nodded once. Then she squared her shoulders, let go of my hand, and turned to face her father and the chaos of the grand hall with the full dignity of an Elthari princess. But I saw her hands trembling in the folds of her robes, and I knew that the girl who had never flinched in her life had just begun to understand that the small, stubborn human she had purchased was not quite what she had thought. And the worst of her discoveries was still ahead. The Emperor summoned me to the throne room within the hour. I was still wearing my bloodied festival clothes when the Imperial Guards came for me. My arms were bruised from the fight. A long cut ran down my left cheek from where the first assassin's tray had clipped me. I had not had time to wash, or change, or do anything except stand beside Princess Lyra as the grand hall had been cleared, and the nobles had been sent home with grim warnings about staying silent. Now I walked between 12 tall guards in full battle armor, their weapons drawn, their faces hard as stone. They did not trust me anymore. They did not know what I was, but they knew I was no longer just a curiosity. I was a strategic problem, a question their emperor needed answered before an unknown fleet began taking apart their outposts. Princess Lyra walked beside me. She had changed into a simpler robe of deep blue, and her silver hair was pulled back into a single long braid. She looked younger this way and more tired. She had not spoken to me since the messenger had delivered his news. I did not blame her. She had a great deal to think about. The throne room of the Elthari Emperor was the largest single chamber in the palace. The walls soared up to a ceiling of colored crystal, each pane a different shade of blue and silver. The floor was polished stone, so smooth it reflected the 1,000 tiny floating lights that drifted near the ceiling. At the far end of the room, on a raised platform of 7 steps, sat the throne itself, carved from a single piece of pale white stone, inlaid with veins of silver metal. And on the throne sat the emperor. Emperor Valerian had ruled the Elthari Empire for 200 cycles. He stood nearly 3 meters tall when he rose, and even seated he seemed larger than any of his guards. His hair was silver, like his daughter's, but cut short in the fashion of old warriors. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray and deep and heavy with years. He wore the formal war robes of his office, which had killed entire civilizations during the Empire's conquering years. When he looked at me, I felt as if a mountain were pressing down on my shoulders. I stopped at the foot of the 7 steps. I did not kneel. I had decided in the short walk to the throne room that I was finished playing the part of the humble slave. Whatever happened next, it would happen to me as a man, not as property. Princess Lyra stood to my left, 1 step away. Crown Princess Valeth stood to the emperor's right, her face carefully blank. A dozen senior advisors and generals filled the space between the throne and the main doors. Every single one of them stared at me. The emperor spoke, and his voice was like stones falling down a deep well. "Stranger, the fleet at the edge of our space claims you as their own. They have given us 6 hours to return you. They have refused to identify themselves further. They have refused to negotiate through our channels. They have ignored our demands for information. Tell us what you are and tell us now." I took a breath. I stood straight. I pulled my shoulders back the way my training officers had taught me years ago when I had first put on a uniform. "My name is Ethan Carter," I said, and my voice carried clearly in the silent throne room. "I'm a lieutenant commander in the Earth Defense Fleet. My service number is 947, letter Alpha 382. I was communications officer aboard the scout vessel Horizon's Edge when we were attacked by Korthani raiders in unmapped space 3 months ago. My crew was killed. I was taken and sold as a slave. I am a citizen of Earth, and under the terms of my service, I request immediate contact with my people and safe return to my home system." The throne room went absolutely silent. Princess Lyra made a soft sound like someone had hit her in the stomach. I turned and looked at her. She had gone completely white. Her ocean eyes were wide, staring at me as if she had never seen me before. Her lips were parted. Her hands were clenched into fists at her sides. She had just realized what I was. I watched her face, and I watched the understanding wash over her in waves. Her mouth opened and closed. Her breath came short. She looked like someone who had just discovered that the pet she had been keeping for 3 months was actually a wild predator that had been watching her the whole time. Because the Elthari Empire had heard of Earth. They had heard of humanity. They had just not believed any of it. 6 years ago, a small trading federation called the Threxic Alliance had pushed into human-claimed space. They had tested the defenses of 3 human colony worlds, thinking to grab a few systems from what their scouts called a primitive and backward species. The rest of the galactic community had assumed the humans would fold within weeks. Humans had only been in the stars for 40 years. Their ships were crude. Their weapons were unrefined. Their doctrine was untested. Instead, humanity had fought the Threxic Alliance across 47 star systems for nearly 2 years. They had suffered casualties that should have broken any civilization. Entire human worlds had been bombarded from orbit. Human ships had burned in the thousands. Any other species would have surrendered or negotiated after the first 6 months. Humans had simply refused to stop. When the Threxic Alliance had made the mistake of firing on a human civilian colony and taking hundreds of lives, humanity had done something that shocked the entire galactic community. They had pursued the Threxic fleet back to its home system. They had not negotiated. They had not accepted surrender. They had systematically destroyed every military installation, every shipyard, every orbital platform the Threxic Alliance owned. They had left the civilian population completely alone, untouched, unharmed. But they had removed the Threxic military from existence in the span of a single month. The councils of the galaxy had called it disproportionate. They had called it extreme. They had called it many things. Humans had called it a lesson. The galactic community had quietly filed away several important observations about the newcomer species. Humans were far more dangerous than they looked. Humans did not believe in proportional response. And most important of all, humans never, ever abandoned their own. The Elthari Empire, in their great wisdom, had filed all of this under the category of rumors about minor frontier species and had promptly forgotten about it. After all, the Elthari ruled thousands of worlds. What was one upstart species at the edge of the galaxy compared to the oldest empire in the known stars? They were about to find out. Emperor Valerian's gray eyes had narrowed. He leaned forward slightly on his throne. The advisors behind him began to murmur, quickly and quietly, their faces showing dawning understanding. Humanity, the Emperor said slowly. Earth, the small species that fought the Threxic War. The same, Your Imperial Majesty, I said. And the fleet outside our borders is your people. I would assume so, Your Imperial Majesty. Earth has one rule above all others when it comes to our service members. We do not leave them behind. Not ever. Not for any reason. 12 ships is a modest response. I would expect more to arrive in the coming days. One of the generals behind the throne let out a short, harsh breath. I could see calculations running behind his eyes. The Elthari Empire had thousands of warships. 12 human vessels should have been nothing. But the reports from the Threxic War had told a different story. 12 human vessels, properly crewed, could do a great deal of damage before they were finally stopped. And the key word in that sentence was finally. Humans did not stop when you hurt them. Humans did not stop when you won battles against them. Humans stopped only when every last one of them was gone, and the cost of making a human stop was always, always, higher than any sensible civilization was willing to pay. The Emperor was silent for a long moment. His gray eyes moved from me to his daughter and back again. He saw Princess Lyra's white face. He saw the way her hands were shaking. He was a shrewd ruler. He understood exactly what his daughter had done and exactly how much trouble it would cause. "My daughter purchased you at a slave market," he said finally. "She did, Your Imperial Majesty. She kept you as a personal attendant for 3 months. She did. She tested you, forced you into combat, treated you as property. She did, Your Imperial Majesty." The Emperor closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, they were hard as polished stone. "And what will your people demand as compensation for this mistake, Lieutenant Commander Carter of Earth?" I considered the question carefully. This was the most important moment of my entire captivity. The words I chose in the next minute would shape the future of relations between humanity and the Elthari Empire for generations to come. Princess Lyra was watching me. Crown Princess Valith was watching me. Every advisor and general in the room was watching me. I thought about what my commanders would want me to say. I thought about what my fleet would expect. And I thought about Princess Lyra, who had bought me at a market, yes, but who had also kept me alive when many others would have sent me to the pits to die. Who had trusted me with her life tonight. Who had tested me, yes, but who had also laughed with me over blue wine and listened to my stories of Earth, and who was now standing beside me, frozen in terror at what her youthful cruelty might have unleashed upon her people. I made my choice. "I will speak for myself, Your Imperial Majesty," I said carefully. "Not for my government. My government will make its own demands in its own time. But if my voice carries any weight in these matters, I would speak in favor of restraint." The Emperor's eyebrows rose very slightly. This was not what he had expected. "Restraint," he repeated. "Your daughter saved my life at that auction, whether she knew it or not. She brought me into her home. She tested me, but she also fed me and healed me and gave me clean clothes. Tonight, I defended her, and it was my choice to do so. She has treated me as something between a curiosity and a servant, yes, but she has never been truly cruel, and I believe she has begun to see me as something more than property, though she might not admit it yet." Princess Lyra made another small sound. I did not look at her. "My recommendation, Your Imperial Majesty, would be this. Allow me to contact my people. Allow me to explain what has happened here. Offer the Empire's formal apology for the misunderstanding and offer to open trade relations between our two civilizations. There is much that we could learn from each other. Your empire is ancient and vast. My people are new and restless. We could help each other more than we could harm each other." The Emperor considered this for a long time. The advisors behind him whispered urgently. One of the generals was nodding slowly. The idea of opening relations with the new and dangerous human species, rather than facing them in battle, was clearly appealing to some of them. "And what do you want in return, Lieutenant Commander Carter?" I turned to look at Princess Lyra. Her ocean blue eyes met mine. I saw the fear there, and the confusion, and the strange, hopeful thing that was starting to rise under it. "Her freedom to choose," I said quietly. "She bought me at an auction. She owned me for 3 months. I do not hate her for it, but I would ask that she be allowed to continue her life without punishment from her own family for this mistake. I would ask that she be allowed to decide on her own what kind of ruler she will be one day. I would ask that the Empire not use her as a scapegoat for what has happened." The throne room was silent. Princess Lyra was staring at me. Her eyes were bright. I thought she might be about to cry, though I had never seen her cry before and was not sure she even knew how. The Emperor studied me for a very long time. Then slowly he nodded. "Contact your people, Lieutenant Commander Carter of Earth. Tell them the Elthari Empire wishes to speak with them. Tell them their citizen is safe and will be returned to them with full honors. We will discuss the rest through proper channels." I bowed. It was the first time I had bowed to anyone in this empire by choice. "Thank you, Your Imperial Majesty." As I was led from the throne room, Princess Lyra walked beside me. She was silent, but her hand, very briefly, brushed against mine. And when I looked at her, I saw that she was no longer the untouchable, never-flinching princess of the silver throne. She was a 19-year-old girl who had just learned that the small, stubborn creature she had bought at a market 3 months ago, had held her entire empire's fate in his hands, and had chosen to spare her. The second hardest conversation of my life was about to begin. The first had just ended. The communication chamber of the imperial palace was a perfect circle, carved from pale blue stone, with a single pedestal in the exact center. When I stood on that pedestal and looked up, my image was transmitted across 12 light years to the lead ship of the human fleet hanging at the edge of Elthari space. The face that appeared in the air before me was Admiral Margaret Hollies of the Earth Defense Fleet, a woman I had served under for 4 years before my assignment to the horizon's edge. Her hair had more gray in it than I remembered. Her eyes were exactly as sharp as I remembered. When she saw me, really saw me, her face went through 3 emotions in rapid succession: relief, anger, and then the careful professional mask of a senior officer. "Lieutenant Commander Carter," she said, "report." I gave her the full report, standing at attention on that pedestal in the center of the Elthari communication chamber. I told her about the raiders, about the loss of the horizon's edge, about the slave market, about Princess Lyra, about the 3 months of captivity in the palace, about the assassination attempt and the conversation with the emperor. I left nothing important out, and I did not try to make myself sound either better or worse than I had been. Admiral Hollies listened without interruption. When I finished, she was silent for nearly a minute. Behind her, I could see the bridge of her command ship, the United Earth Ship Valor, one of the newest deep space carriers in the fleet. "And your recommendation, Commander?" she asked at last. "Restraint, Admiral. Open relations with the Elthari Empire. They have offered formal apology and full repatriation. I am unharmed. No further action against this civilization is warranted." Admiral Holly studied me through the communication link. I knew what she was looking for. She was looking for signs that I had been broken, that I had developed sympathy for my captors in the way that sometimes happened to prisoners, that my judgment had been compromised. "You are certain of this assessment, Commander?" "I am, Admiral. The Elthari Empire is old, powerful, and politically complex. A war with them would cost us greatly, even if we eventually won. And we would win, eventually. But the cost in lives would be far higher than anything we have paid before, and the rest of the galaxy is watching. A peaceful resolution here would establish humanity as a reasonable and honorable civilization. A violent resolution would mark us as something the rest of the stars must fear." She considered this for a long moment, then she nodded. "Your recommendation is noted, Commander. The fleet will stand down from battle readiness, but will remain in position while negotiations proceed. You will remain on the Elthari homeworld as our official liaison until formal diplomatic channels are established. Can you handle that assignment?" "Yes, Admiral." "Good, and Commander?" "Yes, Admiral." Her voice softened just slightly. "Welcome home, Ethan, even if you are not quite home yet." The communication ended. I stepped down from the pedestal, and for the first time in 3 months, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened to me. My knees shook. My hands trembled. I sat down heavily on the stone floor of the communication chamber, closed my eyes, and breathed. I was not dead. My crew was gone, but I had survived. I had spoken to my admiral. I had brought my people back from the edge of war. I had done my duty, and I had done it well. I allowed myself 5 minutes to feel all of it. Then I stood up, straightened my clothes, and went to find Princess Lyra. She was waiting for me in the palace gardens. It was well past midnight now, and the air was cool. The 3 moons of the Elthari homeworld hung in the sky above us, each one a different color: silver for the largest, pale blue for the middle, and deep red for the smallest. The combined light painted the gardens in shades I had no name for. She was sitting on a low stone bench beside a pool of floating water flowers. She had changed into a simple gray robe with her silver hair loose around her shoulders. When I approached, she did not look up. "Your people have agreed to negotiations," I said, sitting down beside her without waiting to be invited. Another thing I had decided I was no longer going to do. I was done asking permission. My father informed me, she said quietly. You did me a great kindness, Ethan. I did not deserve it. Probably not. She looked up at me sharply, then saw my small smile and looked away again. After a moment, I heard her let out a shaky breath. You could have ended us, she said. You could have called for our destruction. You could have asked your admiral to burn my family's palace to ash. After everything we did to you, after everything I did, you could have taken your revenge and nobody would have called it unjust. I thought about it, I admitted, for about 3 seconds. Then I decided it was not the kind of person I wanted to be. Why? I considered the question. The answer was complicated. It had many parts. Because I am tired of hating people, Lyra, I said, using her name for the first time without her title. Because 3 months in the slave pits taught me that hate is heavy, and I have been carrying it long enough. Because my crew is already gone, and killing you would not bring them back. Because you are 19 years old, and you were taught to be cruel before you were old enough to choose otherwise. And because somewhere under all the princess training and the court games and the silver robes, I think there is a person who might actually be worth knowing. She turned to face me fully. Her ocean eyes were full of moonlight. You think too highly of me, Ethan Carter. Maybe, or maybe nobody has ever thought highly enough of you. She stared at me for a long moment. Then, very quietly, the princess who had never flinched began to cry. It was not a loud crying or a dramatic one, just quiet tears that rolled down her cheeks while she sat very still, as if she did not know what to do with them. I sat beside her. I did not reach for her. I did not say anything foolish. I just sat while the 3 moons moved slowly across the sky above us, and I let her cry. When she was finished, she wiped her face with the back of her hand, looking surprised and slightly embarrassed. I have not done that since I was a child, she said. I did not know I still could. Everyone can. Most people just forget how or forget that they are allowed to. She laughed a small watery laugh. You are the strangest creature I have ever met, Ethan Carter. I have been told that before. What happens now? It was a good question. I thought about it for a while before I answered. Now I go home, for a while. I need to see my family. I need to attend the services for my crew. I need to sleep in my own bed in my own house and remember what it feels like to be free. After that, I will come back here. I am being assigned as the first official liaison between humanity and your empire. We will be seeing a great deal of each other, Princess. She smiled. It was a small smile and a sad one, but it was real. Good, she said. I would not wish to lose you so soon after finding out who you really are. We sat in the garden for a long time after that. We did not speak much. Sometimes we did not speak at all. There was something healing about sitting beside another person in silence, especially a person who had been your enemy and was now something else, something neither of you had a name for yet. 3 weeks later, I was back on Earth. The homecoming was harder than I had expected. I had to tell 12 families that their loved ones were not coming back. I had to stand at 12 memorial services. I had to accept a medal from the president of the United Earth Federation, which I did not feel I deserved, because I was the one who had survived when so many better people had not. But I also got to sleep in a real bed. I got to eat my mother's cooking again. I got to walk along a beach in California and feel sand under my bare feet. I got to remember what it felt like to be a man and not a piece of property. I was home for 2 months. It was not long enough, but it was enough. When my orders came through for my new assignment, I was ready. I returned to the Elthari homeworld as the first official Earth Ambassador's chief liaison, a new position that had been created specifically because of the situation that I had been at the center of. My job was to help build the first formal relationship between humanity and an empire that had existed for longer than my species had known how to write. Princess Lyra met me at the landing field. She was not alone this time. Crown Princess Valith had died in a hunting accident shortly after my departure. I did not ask about the details. Some things were better not to know. Lyra was the crown princess now, and one day she would be empress. She had changed. I could see it in the way she held herself, in the calm, steady confidence that had replaced the sharp edges I remembered. She was still beautiful. She was still dangerous. But there was something in her eyes that had not been there before, something that looked like the beginning of wisdom. She greeted me with the formal bow of her office, as the crown princess of the Elthari Empire meeting the representative of a foreign power. Then, after the cameras and the reporters and the diplomatic observers had all recorded the official moment, she leaned close and whispered in my ear, "Welcome back, little primate. I have so much to show you." I laughed out loud, which was probably not diplomatic. I did not care. The reporters would write what they wrote. The months that followed were the beginning of something the galaxy had never seen before. A trade partnership between the oldest empire and the stars and the newest species to leave its home system. It was not easy. There were arguments. There were misunderstandings. There were moments when I thought the whole thing might fall apart. But Lyra and I, working together from opposite sides of the negotiation table, managed to hold it together. Humanity began selling to the Elthari. Agricultural products at first. Our crops grew in soils where their crops would not grow. Then medicines, because our biology and theirs was different enough that our medical advances treated some of their ancient diseases in ways they had never thought to try. Then art and music and stories. Humans had so many stories. The Elthari had forgotten how to make stories that were not about politics. They bought ours eagerly. And in return, the Elthari opened their star charts to us. They shared their knowledge of other civilizations we did not yet know. They taught us about galactic history going back thousands of years before humans had left their own atmosphere. They gave us star drives that could carry ships 3 times faster than anything we had built ourselves. But the most important thing the Elthari did was something they did not even realize they were doing at first. They told the rest of the galaxy about humans, about our strange refusal to stop when we started something, about our deep loyalty to our own, about our willingness to show mercy when we did not have to, about the strange mixture of toughness and kindness that seemed to live in every human the Elthari met. The word spread. Other civilizations took note. The reputation of humanity began to shift from dangerous newcomer to complicated but honorable partner. 2 years after my return to the Elthari homeworld, I attended the coronation of Empress Lyra Vanal, the youngest ruler in the history of the Silver Throne. She was 22 cycles old by her people's counting. She had inherited an empire that stretched across thousands of worlds, and she had promised her people a reign unlike any before it. I stood in the ceremonial position reserved for foreign dignitaries of honor. I wore the full dress uniform of the Earth Defense Fleet, which I had kept my commission in despite my diplomatic duties. When she walked past me on her way to the throne, she caught my eye, and she smiled the same small private smile she had first shown me over blue wine in her chambers, so long ago. Later that night, at the coronation ball, she pulled me aside into a quiet corner of the grand hall. "Ethan," she said, "I have something to tell you, something I have been thinking about for a long time now." "What is it, Your Imperial Majesty?" She made a face at the title. "Do not call me that, not when we are alone, never when we are alone." "What is it, Lyra?" She took a deep breath. Then very carefully, she said something that changed my life. "I am dissolving the slave trade across the Elthari Empire. All slaves, everywhere in my territory, will be freed by imperial order. The markets will be shut down. The pits will be emptied. Anyone who purchased a slave under the old laws will receive fair compensation. Anyone who refuses to comply will have their estates seized. This will take years to fully accomplish, and it will make me many enemies among the old noble families, but it will be done." I stared at her. I did not know what to say. "Lyra," I finally managed. "Why?" She smiled. Her ocean eyes were bright. "Because 3 years ago," she said softly, "I bought a man at an auction, and he turned out to be worth more than my entire empire. And I realized, Ethan, that no one should ever again wonder what they might have missed because they bought a person at a market. The price of slavery is too high when we do not know what we are purchasing. I pulled her into a hug then, which was absolutely not the correct diplomatic protocol for greeting an empress, and she laughed against my shoulder, and we both cried a little, and it was the strangest and best moment I had experienced since I had come home. Years have passed since that night. I still serve as the chief liaison between humanity and the Elthari Empire, though the empire is now called the Elthari Commonwealth, and its member worlds vote in a great council alongside their empress. Lyra has ruled with a wisdom that has astonished her people and the galaxy at large. The slave trade is gone from her territory, and other empires are beginning to follow her lead, not because they want to, but because the Elthari Commonwealth has become powerful enough that disagreeing with its empress is expensive. My people have grown as well. Humanity now has colonies across 400 star systems. We have built starships that would have seemed like magic to the young officer who once served aboard the horizon's edge. We are still new in the great timeline of the galaxy, but we are no longer ignored. When humans speak in the Council of Civilizations, the other species listen. And sometimes, late at night, when I am alone in my quarters on the Elthari homeworld, I think back to that slave auction. I remember the chains on my wrists. I remember the cold metal platform under my feet. I remember the moment Princess Lyra Vainal first walked into that hall with her silver hair and her ocean eyes, and how she did not flinch at anything she saw. And I remember the moment, 3 months later, when she finally did flinch. When she learned what I was, and what my people were, and what she had unknowingly brought into her palace. The galaxy has grown strange and wonderful in the years since that moment. Old empires have partnered with young species. Ancient ways have been set aside for new ideas. Peace has held mostly, across most of the stars that we know. It has not been a perfect peace. Nothing is ever perfect. But it has been a peace built on the understanding that every civilization, young or old, has something valuable to offer, and that no being should ever be bought or sold at a market like property. Humans played a part in that change, not the only part, not even the largest part, but a real part. Because one of us got lost in the stars, and our people came to find him. And we never ever leave our own behind. Not then, not now, not ever. The end.